everybody, and welcome back to the channel, 2BeLikeChrist. Yesterday, we started a short series on the model prayer in Matthew chapter 6 as we travel through the Sermon on the Mount. And today we do section number 2, and that is verse 11. Verse 11 is pretty simple. Give us this day our daily bread. So, question. Why do you think God asks us to pray for daily bread? There's a little bit of a picture of this back in Exodus chapter 16. You remember the children of Israel are leaving Egypt and they're getting out. They've escaped Pharaoh. They've crossed the Red Sea. And then they get into the wilderness on their way to Canaan, and they get a little hungry. The only problem is they don't have anything to eat. So as the Israelites did so many times, they started to grumble and complain and say, oh, we should just go back to Egypt because we're going to die out here in the wilderness. And so God, as he always did, he actually provided food for them. And it was literally bread from heaven. You remember the manna? And every single day, except for the Sabbath day, this manna would be spread all over the ground. And they would collect just enough for that one day's portion, one day's eating. And then the next day they would have to go pick it up again. So every single night they went to bed with no food for the next day. And they had to wake up and believe that God was going to provide for them. So why did God do that? And why did he lead them that way? And how does that have an effect on the way that I pray today? I think part of the reason that God did this was to help them to strengthen their faith and to realize that they were sustained by God and nobody else. But my opinion's not worth so much, and so let's go to the Bible to find out the real reason that God did this. And in Deuteronomy 8, verse 3, God tells us why. And he humbled you, talking about the Israelites, and let you hunger and fed you with manna, which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, that he might make you know that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that comes from the mouth of the Lord. When they were back in slavery, they had plenty of food, but now that they're with God, they've got to lean on him to give them the food that they need. But, let's be honest, this request seems a little bit odd in the culture that we live in today. It's by show of hands, and not that I can actually see you, but how many people got up this morning and prayed that God would give them just enough food for today, that they would be able to eat something today? Anybody? Probably not, right? This is not a typical problem in our culture. Most days we don't get up and worry about what we're going to eat or if we're going to eat. So why does Jesus pull us back to this illustration of Exodus 16 and to these words that he actually quoted in his temptation in Matthew chapter 4? And why mention bread? Why is this what he calls us to? And I think the reason is to keep us from having the attitude that most of us had when we woke up this morning. And that attitude is, even though we may never express it outright, is God doesn't give me my food. My secure job does. My bank account does. My skills and my abilities, my education has allowed me to work and to get that bread for myself. We think sometimes that we have it all under control, and we may need God for the big things of life, the things that are a little bit out of our reach. But the small stuff like, what I'm going to eat for lunch today, I got that. Why did none of us get up and pray this prayer this morning? The reason is, the real practical reason is, whether we admit it or not, is that we don't believe that God gives us these things. We think we have it under control by ourselves. And I think we can prove that if we take a look at Christians kind of as a whole in a broad stroke of Christianity. Because when we pray, what is it that we pray for the most? We pray more when we have health troubles, or when we have legal issues, or these big things, these things that I can't get a hold of and take care of myself. But what happens when the health problems get resolved and we're healthy again, or the legal problems go away, or the financial problems go away? We pray less most of the time. And we kind of get lulled back into this self-assurance, self-sufficient, self-control kind of attitude. Just as we talked about a couple studies ago in this same chapter, part of the reason for prayer is to remind us of things. And I think in this instance, Jesus is in part, using this prayer as a way to guard ourselves against that mentality that is so easy to take on in a culture that's as rich and abundant as our own. Guarding us against thinking that we can provide even the smallest things for ourselves. I've been convinced by my own life and by watching the church in this country that the reason, at least part of the reason, we're so flippant about prayer, that we don't dedicate ourselves and dedicate time and set aside part of our day every day for prayer is because we really think that we can do things by ourselves. And we think we have the things to prove it, right? I have the things to prove that I can take care of myself. But you know what? While we've been out shopping for all those things, what we've actually bought is the bill that the devil and materialism are selling us. And that is that we don't need God because we have all our things. Jesus is calling us to speak with and make our request and put our trust in a Father who wants to give us all these things. God is glorified when His people put their trust in Him and He provides for them in return. So in your daily prayers, as you take this model and you put it into your life, Jesus is guarding us against an idea of self-sustaining Christianity. You know, that idea really flies in the face of all of Christianity, especially if you consider what we've talked about in the Sermon on the Mount already, and as we go into the context of the last half of chapter 6 and chapter 7, Jesus is calling people to live a life that doesn't look anything like the lives that the world lives. And when you embrace that life, really your only option is to lean on God for Him to take care of you, because your life is going to be significantly different than the path that the world tells you to take to make something of yourself. When you allow God to make something of you, you're going to have to put your trust in Him, because you can't be on both sides of that fence. Thanks again for watching. We have 2 more videos in the short model prayer series. We're going to do the last verse, then we're going to go back up to verse 10. So remember to tune in tomorrow and the next day for those. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, do that. We have quality Christian content right out of the scriptures several days a week. Share the video if it's been beneficial. Like the video, comment if you have anything to say down below, and I'll get back to you. Thanks again for watching.